One studio blew $80 million on a movie so bad, the director begged audiences not to see it. Another poured $60 million into an animated sci-fi epic and watched it vanish from theaters in 2 weeks. A third handed a first-time blockbuster director a blank check, got a 4-hour fever dream back, and never recovered financially. This science fiction has always been Hollywood's most expensive gamble. When it works, you get Star Wars. When it doesn't, you get lawsuits, shuttered production companies, and executives quietly clearing out their desks. These are 11 sci-fi movies that flopped so hard, they nearly took entire studios down with them. Hi, my name is Jeffrey, and this is Old School Movies. If you're new here, this channel is all about digging into the films Hollywood would rather you forgot. The disasters. The disasters that somehow became classics, and the disasters that are just disasters. No sugarcoatings, no nostalgia goggles, just the real story of what happened behind the camera and why it all went so spectacularly wrong. All right, let's get into it.
You've done a good job.
Number 11, Dune, 1984. Let's start with one that genuinely hurts to talk about, because the bones of this thing are extraordinary. Frank Herbert's novel is one of the greatest science fiction stories ever written. Epic in scope, philosophically dense, politically layered, it deserved an incredible film adaptation. What it got instead was David Lynch having what can only be described as a very public, very expensive breakdown on celluloid. The budget was somewhere around $40 to $42 million. It made roughly $30 million worldwide. On a movie that size, that is a catastrophic loss. Universal and Dino De Laurentiis had sunk everything into this one. De Laurentiis had already built an entire production studio in Mexico just to film it. That's not a metaphor. He literally constructed a studio. Lynch was never the right fit, and he'll be the first one to tell you that. He's gone on record saying he made too many compromises, lost too much creative control, and that the final cut of the film was not his vision. He even disowned it, asked that his name be removed from the television version and replaced with Alan Smithee, the classic Hollywood pseudonym directors use when they want to pretend they were never in the room. The reviews were savage. Critics called it incomprehensible, bloated, and visually chaotic. Audiences who hadn't read the book had absolutely no idea what was happening. Audiences who had read the book were furious about what got changed. And yet, go back and watch it today, and there's something undeniably magnetic about it. The production design is genuinely unlike anything else from that era. The costume work is astonishing. Kyle MacLachlan is doing his absolute best. It's a mess, but it's a fascinating mess. The kind of mess only a truly talented director can make when everything goes wrong all at once.
A young warrior is called upon to free his people.
Number 10, The Black Hole, 1979. Disney wanted their own Star Wars. That's really the entire story of how this movie got made. Star Wars had come out in 1977 and made an insane amount of money, and every studio in Hollywood immediately started asking the same question. How do we get some of that? Disney's answer was The Black Hole. A budget of $20 million, which at the time was the most expensive film Disney had ever produced. They pulled out every technical stop they had. First Disney film to receive a PG rating, they built enormous sets. They did genuinely impressive practical effects work for the time. And then audiences went to see it and kind of shrugged. It made about $35 million domestically, which sounds okay until you factor in marketing, and the fact that Disney had positioned this as their tentpole event of the decade. It was supposed to launch a franchise. There were no sequels. There were barely any action figures that anyone wanted. The real problem was identity. This movie couldn't decide what it was. Half the time, it wants to be a dark, unsettling psychological thriller. And honestly, those moments are pretty effective. Then suddenly you've got these comic relief robots doing slapstick routines, like you wandered into a completely different film by accident. The tonal whiplash is something else. It's like ordering a steak and someone keeps sneaking bites of cotton candy onto your plate. Number 9, Battlefield Earth, 2000. Oh boy, here we go. I want you to imagine the most aggressively, defiantly bad movie you've ever seen in your life. Now imagine it cost $73 million. Now imagine the star produced it himself and genuinely believed it was going to win Academy Awards. That's Battlefield Earth. John Travolta had been trying to get this movie made for years. It's based on a novel by L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology. And Travolta is a devoted Scientologist, so make of that what you will. He finally got it greenlit off the back of his Pulp Fiction comeback, and the results were something. The film made about $21 million worldwide against a budget of $73 million. Warner Brothers and Franchise Pictures took an absolute bath on it. And Franchise Pictures actually got sued afterward by investors who claimed the budget had been deliberately inflated. The lawsuit alone tells you everything you need to know about the financial chaos surrounding this production. Critics didn't just pan it, they went to war with it. It swept the Razzies in 2001, winning every single category it was nominated for, including Worst Picture, Worst Director, Worst Actor, and Worst Screen Couple. Travolta and anyone unfortunate enough to share a scene with him. It was later named the worst film of the decade by multiple publications. And the Dutch angles. I have to mention the Dutch angles. Every single shot in this movie is tilted, everyone. I don't know why, nobody knows why, it just is. Number 8, John Carter, 2012, Disney again. You'd think they'd have learned. $250 million budget, made $284 million worldwide. Sounds close until you factor in the roughly $100 million spent on marketing, and you realize Disney lost somewhere in the neighborhood of $200 million on this thing. It is one of the most expensive box office failures in the history of cinema. John Carter is based on Edgar Rice Burroughs' Barsoom novels written in the early 1900s. These books literally inspired Star Wars, Avatar, Flash Gordon, Superman. Without John Carter, there is no modern science fiction as we know it. And yet, when the movie came out, critics called it derivative, which is a little like calling the inventor of the wheel unoriginal, because cars exist. The production was troubled. The director, Andrew Stanton, was a Pixar legend. Finding Nemo, Wall-E. But this was his first live-action feature, and Disney gave him an almost unlimited budget with not enough oversight. The marketing was famously terrible. The original title was John Carter of Mars. Disney removed the words of Mars because a previous Mars movie had bombed and they were spooked. So they just called it John Carter, which tells you literally nothing about what the movie is. The head of marketing at Disney lost his job over this one. Stanton never directed another live-action film. Number 7, Supernova 2000. This one is a case study in what happens when a production completely collapses mid-shoot. The film went through 3 directors. 3, Walter Hill started it, got replaced, asked to have his name removed. Francis Ford Coppola came in, shot some additional material, also asked to have his name removed. The final cut was released under the name Thomas Lee, which is the sci-fi equivalent of Alan Smithy. MGM spent around $90 million making it. It made $14 million at the box office. There's not much more to say about the math there. The movie itself is a deep space medical rescue thriller with James Spader and Angela Bassett, which on paper sounds perfectly watchable. And it is perfectly watchable. That's almost the tragedy of it. It's not an insult to cinema. It's just it's hopelessly mediocre. The kind of movie you forget you watched while you're still watching it.
Suddenly all hell breaks loose. You do your job, and then it all goes back to nothing happens.
Number 6, Virus, 1999. Here's a film that Jamie Lee Curtis has been very candid about in the interviews. She called it the worst movie she ever made. Those are her words, not mine. And she's right. Universal spent $75 million on this sci-fi horror film about an alien intelligence that takes over a Russian research vessel and starts building killing machines out of human body parts. That premise is actually not terrible. The execution absolutely is. It made $14.5 million worldwide. Universal absorbed losses of close to $60 million. The visual effects, which ate up most of that budget, they look like exactly what they are. 1999 computer graphics being asked to carry a film that forgot to include a coherent story. The director, John Bruno, was an effects supervisor who had worked on Terminator 2 and True Lies. Great effects guy, first-time director, and unfortunately, it shows in almost every scene that doesn't involve something exploding.
What the hey, we're still in business.
Yeah, nothing like being wanted.
Say that again, I'll be in the end.
Number 5, The Postman, 1997. Kevin Costner had already done Waterworld, which we'll get to in a minute, and Hollywood had mostly forgiven him for it. Then he made The Postman, and they stopped forgiving him for a while. The budget was $80 million. It made $17 million domestic. Costner directed it himself, starred in it himself, and reportedly had significant creative control over the entire production. The film runs for 3 hours. 3 hours about a post-apocalyptic mail carrier trying to civilization through the power of letter delivery. I'm not making that up. That's the movie. There are genuinely good ideas buried in here, and Costner is a real filmmaker with a real eye for landscape and atmosphere. But this needed someone to walk into his editing room and very firmly say, "Kevin, we need to talk about some cuts." It won 5 Razzies, including Worst Picture and Worst Director. Costner took those personally. He's talked about it in interviews over the years, with this wounded quality that's actually kind of endearing. He really believed in this one, and it really did not believe back.
Mailman's more important than the mail.
Boy, he's smart.
Number 4, Waterworld, 1995. The most expensive movie ever made at the time. On-budget estimates range from $175 million to $235 million, depending on who you ask and what they're willing to admit. Universal was terrified throughout production. There was flooding, there were accidents, there were constant script rewrites. There was a kidnapping threat against Costner's family mid-shoot. The production was a genuine nightmare from start to finish. And then it came out and made $264 million worldwide, which actually means it turned a profit eventually. But with marketing costs factored in, Universal lost money on the theatrical run, and the damage to everyone's reputation was already done. The press had called it fish tar and Kevin's Gate before it even opened. That kind of narrative is almost impossible to come back from. And here's the thing though, Waterworld is not a bad movie. It's genuinely not. It's loud and dumb and fun in exactly the way a big summer action movie is supposed to be. The jet ski sequences are legitimately exciting. Costner is a committed screen presence. Dennis Hopper is completely unhinged and magnificent. Catch it on a Saturday afternoon with no expectations and you might be surprised. Number 3, Flash Gordon, 1980. Dino De Laurentiis shows up on this list twice, which should tell you something about Dino De Laurentiis. Flash Gordon cost $35 million and made a reasonable amount back, around $27 million domestic. But the international numbers were soft, and by any measure, this was not the franchise-launching blockbuster De Laurentiis had envisioned. He wanted his own Star Wars. He got a very expensive, very campy, extremely Italian interpretation of a 1930s comic strip. And look, I love Flash Gordon. The Queen soundtrack is untouchable. The costumes are genuinely insane in the best possible way. Max von Sydow plays Ming the Merciless with such committed theatrical grandeur that you almost forget you're watching a movie that appears to have been designed by someone who lost a bet. But it's not Star Wars. It was never gonna be Star Wars. Sam Jones as Flash is charming in a completely wooden way that somehow works and then doesn't, and then somehow works again. The film found its audience eventually on home video and midnight screenings, but by then the financial damage was done and De Laurentiis had already moved on to the next gamble, which brings us back to Dune. The man never learned. God bless him. Number 2, Titan AE, 2000. This one genuinely makes me angry, and I don't apologize for that. 20th Century Fox spent $75 million on this animated sci-fi film, and then barely marketed it, and then seemed surprised when it made $36 million at the box office, and then shut down the entire animation studio that made it. Don Bluth and Gary Goldman, the guys behind The Secret of NIMH and An American Tale and The Land Before Time, lost their studio because Fox couldn't figure out how to sell a beautifully made animated science fiction film to audiences who would have loved it if they'd known it existed. The film is set after Earth is destroyed by an alien race and follows a young man searching for a legendary spacecraft that could save what's left of humanity. The animation is stunning. The voice cast includes Matt Damon, Drew Barrymore, Bill Pullman, John Leguizamo, and Nathan Lane. The story is genuinely emotional, and the ending is one of the most optimistic and beautiful moments in science fiction animation. Fox buried it, lost money on it, and used the losses to justify shutting down Fox Animation entirely. Don Bluth hasn't directed a feature since. That's the part that really stings.
20th Century Fox.
Number 1, The Adventures of Pluto Nash. $2,000 to $100 million budget, $4.4 million at the box office. I need you to sit with those numbers for a moment. Warner Brothers spent $100 million on a sci-fi comedy set on the moon starring Eddie Murphy, and it made $4 million. That is one of the worst box office to budget ratios in the history of Hollywood. The film sat on a shelf for 2 years after test screenings went so badly that the studio couldn't figure out what to do with it. They eventually just released it, hoping nobody would notice. Nobody noticed. Eddie Murphy has been pretty quiet about this one over the years, and you can't blame him. It came at a moment when his box office power was already being questioned, and Pluto Nash answered the question in the most brutal way possible. The film is not mean-spirited or cruel. It's just completely, utterly, bewilderingly unfunny, which, for a comedy, is the one thing you absolutely cannot be. The production designer, production crew, and effects team did solid work for the money. The sets look like a real moon colony. The world building is actually not bad. It's a perfectly constructed stage for a movie that has nothing to say and no jokes worth hearing. Warner Brothers absorbed the losses. Murphy moved on. And The Adventures of Pluto Nash became the gold standard for how badly a studio can miscalculate everything all at once. So here's what's interesting when you lay all 11 of these out together. Most of them weren't killed by incompetence. They were killed by ambition colliding with overconfidence. Studios got excited, handed out blank checks, stopped asking hard questions, and then looked the other way when things started going sideways. By the time the numbers came in, it was already too late. And the other thing, and I find this genuinely fascinating, is how many of them found their audiences eventually. Dune is a cult classic. Waterworld plays better now than it did in 1995. Flash Gordon never stopped having fans. The box office isn't the final verdict. It never really was. If you made it to the end of this one, thank you, genuinely. Drop a comment and tell me which of these you've actually seen, because I want to know if I'm the only one who sat through The Adventures of Pluto Nash voluntarily. Don't forget to subscribe to Old School Movies, and I'll see you in the next one.
Eddie Murphy.